My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the grand foyer. The air, thick with the scent of lilies and expensive cologne, seemed to mock the simple warmth I carried. My son, David, stood before me, his face a mask of strained politeness, his words cutting deeper than any blade. "Mother," he began, his voice low, almost a whisper, yet amplified by the cavernous space. "You weren't invited. Victoria and I, we have a certain vision for Leo's party. It's a modern theme, upscale. Your presence, well, it would ruin the aesthetic." The words hung in the air, each one a tiny shard of glass, piercing the carefully constructed peace I'd built around myself. My hands, calloused from years of tending to my garden, of mending torn clothes, of shaping clay into beautiful, functional pottery, instinctively clenched. I looked down at the small, hand-painted ceramic bird I held, a gift for my grandson Leo, whose 5th birthday we were supposedly celebrating. It was a robin, its breast a vibrant, hopeful red, just like the one that nested outside my kitchen window every spring. Now it felt heavy, a symbol of everything I was and everything they deemed unworthy. The laughter and chatter from the main hall, moments ago a distant hum, now seemed to crescendo, a mocking symphony of exclusion. I could almost hear the clinking of champagne flutes, the polite murmurs of guests David and Victoria had deemed acceptable. My mind reeled, trying to grasp the reality of the situation. My own son, the boy I had raised, sacrificed for, poured my very soul into, was telling me to leave. From his grandson's birthday party, the boy who, just last summer, had spent weeks at my cottage, his small hands covered in clay, laughing as we molded fantastical creatures, his eyes wide with wonder as I showed him how to coax a robin to eat from his palm. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I stood there, rooted to the spot, the robin clutched so tightly in my hand that its delicate wings might snap. David's eyes, once so full of warmth and boyish mischief, now held a cold, distant glaze I barely recognized. He gestured vaguely towards the door, a dismissive flick of his wrist that spoke volumes. "We're just trying to cultivate a certain atmosphere, Mother. You understand, don't you?" Understand? How could I understand? My understanding was built on a lifetime of warmth, of open doors, of unconditional love. It was woven into the fabric of every handmade gift, every shared meal, every late-night conversation. This was a world I didn't recognize, a world where love was measured by aesthetics and atmosphere, where family was curated like a museum exhibit. My mind drifted back, not to the recent past, but to a time when David was just a boy, all scraped knees and boundless energy. We lived in a small, sturdy house, nestled on the edge of the Red River, its banks lined with ancient cottonwoods. My husband Thomas, a quiet man with hands that could fix anything, and a heart as vast as the Montana sky, had built that house with his own 2 hands. He was a carpenter, a craftsman, and he taught me to appreciate the beauty of things made with care, with intention. I, Alara, was a potter. My studio, a small shed behind the house, was my sanctuary. The scent of damp clay, the rhythmic hum of the wheel, the gentle heat of the kiln. These were the rhythms of my life. I didn't just make pots, I made memories. Each piece, from the simplest mug to the most intricate vase, carried a piece of my soul, of the earth it came from, of the stories whispered into its form. David loved my studio. He'd sit on an overturned bucket, his small face dusted with clay, watching me work. He'd ask endless questions, his curiosity a bright spark. "Mama, why does the clay spin? Mama, how do you make the colors stay?" I'd explain, patiently, about the earth, the water, the fire, about the magic of creation. He'd bring me wildflowers from the fields, pressing them into the soft clay of a newly formed bowl, leaving his tiny fingerprints as permanent marks of his presence. Those pieces, fired and glazed, were scattered throughout our home, not just objects, but living testaments to our shared life. When Thomas passed, Suddenly, unexpectedly from a heart attack, David was only 10. The world tilted on its axis. The silence in the house was deafening, broken only by my own muffled sobs and David's quiet, bewildered grief. It was then that my pottery became more than just a passion. It became our lifeline. I worked tirelessly, selling my wares at local markets, at craft fairs, even taking commissions for custom pieces. Every penny earned went towards keeping our home, towards David's education, towards ensuring he had a semblance of the life Thomas had envisioned for him. I remember one winter, particularly harsh, when the kiln broke down. Money was tight, and repairs seemed impossible. David, seeing my despair, had taken his entire piggy bank, a chipped ceramic pig I had made for him years ago, and poured its contents onto the kitchen table. A scattering of coins, a few crumpled bills. "It's for the kiln, Mama," he'd said, his voice small but resolute, "so you can make more beautiful things." My heart had swelled with a love so fierce it almost hurt. That act, that selfless gesture from a child, had fueled me through countless long nights, through every ache in my hands, every doubt in my mind. I fixed the kiln, and that spring I created a series of hope pots, each one etched with a tiny, resilient sprout, a tribute to David's unwavering spirit. I paid for his college with clay-stained hands and weary eyes. Every commission, every sale, every market stall, I saved every dime. When he got his acceptance letter to a prestigious university in the city, he called me, his voice choked with emotion. "I did it, Mama. I'm going to make you proud." I thought he did. He moved to the city, studied business, and met Victoria at a high-profile charity gala. She was polished, impeccably dressed, and spoke with an air of effortless sophistication. I remember the first time they visited our home. They stayed for exactly one night, barely touching the homemade apple pie I'd baked, the recipe passed down from my grandmother. Victoria brought a bottle of sparkling water, while I served my herbal tea in my hand-thrown mugs. She wore delicate silk slippers on my worn wooden floors, a stark contrast to the sturdy boots I wore daily. After that visit, David began to change. At first it was subtle. His calls grew shorter, punctuated by hurried excuses about important meetings or gallery openings. My gifts, a hand-knitted scarf for him, a small, whimsical clay animal for Victoria, a specially commissioned set of ceramic alphabet blocks for Leo when he was born, stopped appearing in the sparse photos they occasionally posted online. I'd ask about them, gently, and David would say, "Oh, Mother, they just didn't fit the mood this time." Or Victoria would interject, "We're really leaning into a minimalist aesthetic, Ilara. Your pieces, while lovely, are a bit rustic for our current decor." Rustic. The word echoed in my mind, a blunt instrument used to dismiss a lifetime of dedication, of artistry, of love. It was as if I, the woman who had nurtured him, who had shaped his world with her hands, was now a mismatch in their carefully curated life. Now here I stood, a rustic woman, in a modern upscale foyer, being told to leave my grandson's birthday party. Not because of something I'd said, not because of some mistake I'd made, but because of who I was, because of the warmth and authenticity I embodied. I looked around the foyer, at the cold marble floors, the stark white walls, the abstract art that seemed to scream rather than speak. Not a single child's drawing on the fridge, not a single thing handmade. It was a beautiful cage, meticulously constructed, but a cage nonetheless. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Hurt, yes, a deep, aching wound in my soul. But anger, I knew, would come later, after the hurt had hardened into something less breakable. I still held the ceramic robin, its red breast a defiant splash of color in the sterile environment. I folded it gently into my pocket, not discarded, not destroyed, just waiting. Because I wasn't finished yet. Not with this robin, and not with this story. Mortimer, the unraveling had begun long before this party, long before David's dismissive words. Like most unravelings, it started subtly, just one missed stitch at a time. The first time I noticed it, I brushed it off. David had forgotten to tell me about Leo's first school play. I found out from a neighbor whose grandson was in the same class. When I asked David about it, he blinked, like he had genuinely forgotten. "Oh, Mother, it was so chaotic that week. Victoria had a huge client presentation, and I had to prep for a board meeting. It was just exhausting." He said he'd send me pictures. He didn't. The next was Leo's third birthday. I had spent weeks crafting a special gift, a set of hand-painted ceramic story tiles, each one depicting a scene from his favorite book about a brave little fox. Each tile was unique, vibrant, and designed to be held, to be touched, to spark imagination. I mailed it with tracking, carefully wrapped in tissue paper and tied with a silk ribbon. I never saw it again. When I asked if Leo liked it, David texted, "Oh yes, I think so. Victoria said it might be too delicate for his age. We might keep it as a keepsake." The photos from the birthday party showed Leo opening a box of store-bought plastic toys, each one louder and more garish than the last. I wasn't in any of the photos. David and Victoria posted them online with the caption, "Everything curated, everything perfect." I started noticing the patterns. Photos of Leo at exclusive playdates, at high-end children's museums, at themed parties with professional entertainers. David and Victoria front and center, smiling like the cover of a lifestyle blog. Their captions full of hashtags. Hashtag aesthetic, hashtag curated childhood, hashtag elevated living. I used to be part of those captions. Now I was just part of the archive. They stopped posting pictures of the hand-stitched quilt I made for Leo's crib, the growth chart I'd painted with whimsical forest creatures, the soft, knitted animal toys I'd made from organic wool. When I once commented on a photo, just a simple, "He's growing so fast, Grandma loves you," the comment disappeared an hour later. I asked David gently, "Why?" His response, "Oh, Mother, I'm trying to keep a cohesive feed. You know how social media works now. Don't take it personally." A cohesive feed. As if my love didn't match the brand they were building. At first, I tried to adjust. I stopped posting photos of my pottery with Leo's name. I limited my comments. I tried to stay in my lane, as Victoria once put it. When I mailed a letter to Leo's preschool teacher without asking, Victoria called and said, "Alara, I appreciate the intention, but it's important that David and I shape his narrative. We're trying to keep things intentional. Shape his narrative." He was 4. The last time I visited their house, I brought a batch of my famous oatmeal raisin cookies, the same recipe David used to beg for as a teenager. I walked in and was greeted by Victoria with a stiff nod. No hug, no eye contact. She looked past me as if checking to see if I'd brought someone else. David took the cookies and smiled, but that smile, it was brief, plastic, and expired by the time it reached his cheeks. They served artisanal coffee from a sleek, chrome machine that looked like it belonged in a showroom. Their kitchen smelled of imported essential oils and scented candles, not cinnamon or sugar. Everything was white, sterile. Not a single child's drawing on the fridge, not a single thing handmade. Leo came running in, wearing a tiny designer tracksuit and shoes that cost more than my entire month's grocery bill. He hugged me fiercely, burying his face in my sweater. That night, he asked if I would tuck him in. I said yes, of course I would. I read him the fox story again, from memory, because the ceramic story tiles I'd made were in storage. He fell asleep with his hand wrapped around my finger. The next morning, David told me that Victoria had concerns about bedtime routines and boundaries, that they wanted to create consistency. I was asked not to read to Leo at night anymore. Not without permission. Not unless it was a book they provided. I left early. From then on, everything changed. Invitations stopped. Phone calls shortened. My name was mentioned less and less. I became something to manage, to regulate. "Mother, maybe you don't need to bring handmade things every time." "Mother, it's okay if you skip this one. We've got so many people coming." "Mother, just enjoy your peaceful life up there, okay? Let us handle the rest." I was no longer a mother. I was no longer a grandmother. I was a sweet lady in the mountains who needed to stay quaint, quiet, and out of the photos. And Victoria? She no longer even tried. At first she'd say hello. Then she'd nod. Then nothing at all. One visit she passed me the salt without making eye contact. Another time she opened the door, saw me, and said, "David's in the back," before walking away. She had erased me without ever needing to argue. She did not need to raise her voice. She just needed to lower her gaze until I no longer existed. And David? He followed. Willingly. Quietly. Elegantly. It was not sudden, it was slow. Like watching a beautiful, intricate ceramic piece crack, hairline fractures appearing, thread by thread, until you are holding only fragments and wondering where the wholeness went. Until the party, until that text, until the final shard snapped. Courins. It was a Tuesday evening when it happened. I was scrolling through my phone, not for anything in particular, just passing time before the kettle sang. The living room was quiet, save for the crackle of the wood stove expanding in the cold. I had just finished glazing a batch of small, intricate ceramic buttons I had made for the church bazaar, and then I saw it. David had posted new photos. It was a carousel of images from a professional photo shoot with Leo outdoors. Golden light, expensive camera filters. Leo stood in front of a pristine white fence, smiling just the way he used to on my porch steps, his cheeks rosy, his arms outstretched. And he was wearing my sweater. Not just any sweater. It was the one I made last fall, a soft, earthy green wool, with tiny ceramic buttons I had fired myself, each one shaped like a miniature pine cone. I remembered every stitch. I remembered Leo's face when he tried it on, how he twirled in it and said, "I look like a forest explorer, Grandma." I leaned closer to the screen, but the caption. The caption stopped my breath cold. A timeless piece, custom from a boutique in Milan. Custom from a boutique in Milan. I blinked, read it again and again. And suddenly, it was not just the sweater that unraveled. It was me. It was not the lie that hurt the most. It was the theft. The rewriting of truth so easily, so casually, as though my hands and my hours and my heart had never existed. As though warmth, real warmth, could be bought in a boutique or filtered through a hashtag. They had erased me, not with cruelty, but with convenience. The photo had over 700 likes. Compliments poured in. "So chic. Milanese babies are the cutest. Your son has such great taste." Not a single soul knew that the hands who made that sweater had bled once, pricking a finger on a needle, that I had picked that shade of green, because Leo once said it reminded him of the deepest parts of the forest, where he imagined fairies lived. They did not see the hours, the warmth, the care. And maybe they never would. Kakasar, I set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode. I walked over to the old cedar chest in the corner of my living room, the one Thomas had built for me when we were first married. Inside, nestled among old quilts and linen, was my ledger. It was a worn notebook, leather-bound, its pages thick with time. Inside were entries, dated and scribbled, tracking every single thing I had ever made for Leo. February 3, 2020. Yellow duckling ceramic rattle, size newborn. June 12, 2021. Blanket with pine tree embroidery, backed in flannel. October 1, 2022. Fox plushie with one ear bent. December 15, 2023. First Christmas ceramic ornament, red glaze with snowflake design. March 4, 2024. Green wool sweater with pinecone buttons. I turned each page slowly, tracing my own handwriting with my finger, as if to remind myself that I had existed in his life. Each item had a note next to it. Wore it to Sunday school, smiled all day, refused to sleep without it for 2 weeks, called it his magic fox. They were not just clothes, they were memories. And now they were being repackaged, stripped of soul, sold for style points. Aval. I closed the notebook gently and sat in silence for a long while. The stove crackled, the tea cooled. But I did not move. Because something had shifted inside me, not anger, not even grief. Just a clarity I had not felt in years. I was no longer just unwelcome. I was inconvenient to the narrative. and inconvenient things, they get cropped out. But not this time. Not anymore. Brr. I waited 3 days. 3 days after the Instagram post. 3 days after seeing Leo in the sweater I made, described as if it had come from a Milan showroom instead of my quiet studio. I told myself maybe David had not meant to lie. Maybe the caption was for marketing. Maybe it was just careless. But deep down, I knew better. Still, I needed to hear his voice. So I called. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hi, Mother," he said, breezy, distracted. I could hear ambient music in the background, soft jazz chords, the clink of glass, like he was somewhere polished. I swallowed. "David, I saw the pictures of Leo." A pause. "Oh, did you like them? He looked beautiful." I said the sweater looked good on him. Another pause, this one tighter. "Yes, that one." There was no mention of where it came from. No apology. Not even acknowledgement. I waited. Then I asked gently, "David, are you really not inviting me to the party?" He exhaled sharply, like I had asked something exhausting. "Mother, it's not that we do not love you." My hand tightened around the phone. "It's just, the event has a certain flow, aesthetic. You know how Victoria is about energy and presentation. We're hosting it in the gallery space this year. Minimalist, clean, modern. There's a vision. The decor, the lighting, the outfits. You showing up in one of your handmade sweaters would confuse things." I stared out the window. Montana snow was starting to fall again, soft and slow, dusting the bare pine branches. My world was white, quiet, true. "Confuse things?" I asked. He hesitated. "Mother, people come to these events for a certain feel. It's more than just a birthday party. It's also about the brand, the experience." "I'm not a brand," I said softly. There was another long pause. Then his voice changed, sharper now. "Mother, don't do this. Don't make this about guilt. This is about direction. Victoria and I are building something. We're trying to move forward. People don't go to galleries to look at pottery anymore. That's just not where the world is." I didn't speak, because there was nothing left to say. It was not about the sweater, it was not about a party, it was about erasure. It was about cutting away anything that did not fit the version of himself he was curating for strangers, including me. "David," I said finally, my voice trembling despite my efforts, "do you really not want me there?" There was a beat of silence. Then he said it. "Mother, please don't ruin this. People are coming for something beautiful. They're not expecting to see homespun and folk stories." My heart slowed. He might as well have said it outright. "You're the past. You don't belong here." I nodded, though he could not see me. "I understand." "Okay," he said quickly, almost relieved. "Thank you for being mature about it. I knew you'd get it." I didn't get it. But I ended the call. And when I set the phone down, it was like every vein in my body froze. The warmth of 3 decades of sacrifice, of motherhood, of bedtime lullabies and scraped knees and handmade meals, iced over in a single conversation. I sat in my chair and stared at the fire for a long time, not crying, just quiet. Because when the blood stops flowing between mother and child, it is not loud. It is a silence so vast it echoes. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Wolovaso, beat silent quaflas. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind whispered against the window panes, a mournful song accompanying the slow tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. The wood stove glowed faintly, casting dancing orange light across the walls of my kitchen. I sat at the kitchen table in my thick robe, a mug of cold, untouched tea in front of me. The house was so still I could hear the rhythmic drip of a melting icicle outside. Her words echoed in my mind, "Don't ruin this." They're not expecting to see homespun and folk stories. I stood up, crossed the room, and opened the bottom drawer of the old pine cabinet where I kept the family photo albums. There was one album, covered in faded blue denim that hadn't been opened in years. It was filled with pictures from David's childhood, from simpler times. I flipped through the pages until I found it. A photo. It was Leo, maybe 3 years old, standing in front of the stone fireplace in my living room. His cheeks were flushed pink from playing outside, his curls wild with static. He wore the green wool sweater I had made, the very first one with the tiny pinecone buttons. He was laughing, not posing, not filtered, just laughing with his whole face. In the background, a stack of logs glowed in the firelight, a half-finished puzzle lay on the rug, and the mug in his hand was full of cocoa with marshmallows melting around the rim. It was a picture of warmth, a picture of love, and no one could fake it. I sat back down and stared at the photo, holding it in my lap. The longer I looked at it, the more sure I became. David and Victoria could crop me out of their life, but I still had a voice. So I picked up my phone. Not to message them. To message them, the people who had known Leo before the marble countertops and gallery invites. People who had eaten my oatmeal raisin cookies, sat on my porch swing, shared snow days and hearty casseroles, and Sunday afternoons. I opened a group text. One by one, I added names. Mrs. Anya Petrova, Leo's first preschool teacher. Thomas and Janine, the neighbors who helped shovel my walk every winter. Mrs. Evelyn Chen, who used to paint ceramics with me at the community center. Clara, whose daughter was in Leo's ballet class. Even Margaret, who once helped me fix a broken garden gnome. 18 people in total. I did not ask them to take sides. I did not complain. I simply attached the photo and typed, "This is the child I raised. This is the warmth I gave. If that's off-brand, I understand." I stared at the message for a moment, my thumb hovering. Then I pressed send, and in that instant something inside me shifted. Not in anger, but in freedom. I had told the truth. Not loud, but loud enough for those who remembered. The first reply came 5 minutes later. Mrs. Petrova, "He wore that sweater every Wednesday. Said it made him brave. Still remember those pinecone buttons." Then Janine, "Still remember the cocoa you made that day, Alara. Nothing in the world like it." Clara, "I've missed seeing him like that. Thank you for sharing." By midnight, 10 of the 18 had responded, each message like a soft hand on my shoulder. No one needed an explanation. They had been there. They remembered. They knew. The gallery space was pristine. White walls, polished concrete floors, and soft ambient lighting that seemed designed more for illusion than warmth. Long banquet tables stretched the length of the room, covered in linen so smooth it looked untouched by real hands. The chairs were ghost-clear acrylic, like they belonged in a furniture catalog, not a child's birthday party. At the far end stood a massive printed photograph of Leo, arms outstretched, framed by golden light. His laugh frozen in high resolution. He wore a crisp, white linen shirt and tiny leather loafers. Not a speck of mud, not a hint of mischief. Just curated perfection. The guests arrived slowly, in coats of cashmere and designer silk, murmuring greetings, holding slim wine glasses instead of juice boxes. There were canapés on silver trays, figs wrapped in prosciutto, smoked salmon on cucumber rounds. The cake stood untouched, 3 tiers tall, iced in blush fondant, topped with edible flowers flown in from somewhere far away. David and Victoria greeted everyone with practiced grace. Victoria's hair was swept into a sleek low bun, her dress a minimalist column of expensive fabric. David hovered nearby, shaking hands, offering tours of the event installation along the back wall. A looping slideshow of Leo's most aesthetic moments. Gallery visits, tea parties, trips to botanical gardens. There were no photos of Leo covered in mud, none with spaghetti sauce on his chin, none in the sweater I made. They had written me out of the gallery just as cleanly as they had written me out of the guest list. But something else was happening. Something subtle. It began when Clara arrived. She was wearing a long hand-knitted scarf, an old-fashioned one I had made her 2 Christmases ago. She hugged Victoria politely, nodded to David, then glanced once at the slideshow and walked away. She sat at a table near the back, checking her phone. Then came Janine. She looked around the gallery, said hello, smiled at Leo, but her eyes flicked toward the empty chairs. She sat next to Clara. Mrs. Petrova arrived third. She took one step into the gallery, saw the photos, saw David's fixed smile, and paused. "Excuse me," she said softly to no one in particular. "I think I have a prior appointment." She turned and walked out. One of the waiters glanced at David, confused. David forced a laugh, too loud, and said, "I guess she forgot we upgraded the dress code." But the laughter didn't catch. Gosh, stary got por foul loud. By now 5 guests had slipped away quietly. Then a 6th. A woman tapped Victoria on the arm and murmured, "Sorry, dear. I promised to drop something off for Geneva. Hope Leo has a lovely day." Victoria's face twitched, but she nodded. And then it kept happening. One by one, they did not make a scene, they did not raise their voices. They simply stood, offered vague excuses. Errands, children to check on, soup on the stove, and walked out of the room. David's jaw tightened. Victoria clutched her champagne glass just a little too hard. "Something's going on," she whispered to him. He scanned the crowd. The spaces were growing, tables half filled, conversations thinning. Leo was at the center, spinning slowly in his designer outfit, not understanding why the people he loved were leaving one by one. David called after one couple, "Is everything okay?" They smiled politely. "We just remembered something more important." By the time the slideshow reached its 7th loop, nearly half the guests were gone. David looked like a man watching a deal fall apart. Victoria was pale. No one had said my name. But I was in the room nonetheless. In their minds. In their memories. In every person who had once sat at my table, eaten my soup, warmed their hands with cocoa while Leo napped on my chest. I had sent one photo. One message. And that was enough. Because truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be felt. House. The house smelled like cinnamon and clove. I had woken early that morning, knowing I would not be at the gallery. I did not have anywhere to be, and yet my hands moved with purpose. I kneaded the dough slowly, rolled it thin, filled it with brown sugar and pecans for cinnamon rolls. I set the kettle to boil for a pot of strong black tea. I sliced apples for the pie, whipped cream by hand, dusted the table with a bit of flour like snowfall. No cameras, no hashtags, just quiet, just care. The wood stove crackled behind me. Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving a soft, pristine layer over the porch railings. I looked out the window, wondering what the gallery must look like. Fluorescent lights, mirrored walls, a little boy trying to smile while the room around him thinned out like air at altitude. Then I heard it. A knock, gentle, not hurried. I opened the door and found Mrs. Petrova standing there, her long wool coat dusted with snow, her eyes kind. She didn't say much, just held up a small box wrapped in gingham paper. "Thought you might want this back," she said. Inside was the ceramic story tile set I'd made years ago. I found it in the free bin outside the community center. I swallowed hard and stepped aside. "Come in, tea's ready." She nodded once and entered. 20 minutes later, there was another knock. Janine. She brought her husband Thomas and a small thermos of mulled wine. "We didn't feel like staying," she said simply. Then came Clara and her daughter. Then 2 of the parents from Leo's preschool. Then Margaret, with a fresh loaf of rye bread and her hands in the mittens I had made for her 4 winters ago. We didn't speak of the gallery. No one asked what David had said. No one brought up Victoria. We sat around the kitchen table, the fire warming our backs, the tea steaming in mismatched mugs I'd collected over years of yard sales and birthdays. We passed slices of pie, broke cookies in half, and let silence sit with us like an old friend. Someone mentioned Leo's infectious giggle. Someone else remembered how he once tried to help me stir biscuit dough and spilled half the flour on the floor. Everyone laughed, and I sat there, listening, not speaking much, just watching the room fill. Not with decor, not with lighting, but with memory, with truth, with people who had chosen warmth over walls. At one point, someone said softly, This feels more like a birthday party." And we all knew what she meant. No curated photos. No luxury candles. Just hands that made, eyes that saw, hearts that remembered. Night fell. I brought out the sweater. The green one. The one with the pine cone buttons. I passed it around. Each person touched it like something sacred. They remembered not just the stitch, but the story. The boy. The woman behind it. Me. And in that small house in Montana, surrounded by firelight and friends, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not pride. Not vengeance. But peace. The morning after the impromptu gathering, the snow had hardened into a quiet crust. It was the kind that blanketed everything in stillness, where even the trees seemed to be holding their breath. I moved slowly through the house, the floorboards creaking under the weight of old wood and older memories. I made my tea the same way I always had. Loose leaves, boiled water, no sugar. I set it on the windowsill and watched the sky begin to brighten, pale and cold. Then I reached for the photograph. It was tucked in the bottom drawer of my sideboard, wrapped in an old scarf that still carried the scent of cedar and thyme. I unwrapped it carefully, as if it might break, though I knew what truly might break was me. Leo, 3 years old, standing in front of the fireplace, wrapped in the green wool sweater with the pinecone buttons. His arms were open wide, like he was about to take off. His cheeks flushed from the heat of the fire, his hair curling around his face in soft spirals, wild and honest. And his smile, unfiltered, unposed, untouched by anything curated. Just joy. Pure, unshaped joy. The kind you do not get from a bara camera setting or a caption. The kind you earn through hours of quiet, of presence, of putting the child first, before the world had a chance to shape him into something else. I wiped the glass with my sleeve, careful not to smudge the corner where the light caught his eye. Then I walked to the fireplace and hung it back where it had always belonged, centered just above the mantel, just below the place where the ceiling cracked a little in winter. David had taken it down years ago, when he last stayed here, said it looked too rustic, that it did not match the new aesthetic of his life. But now it was back, and next to it I pinned a small piece of cardstock, cream-colored, its edges trimmed with pinking shears. I wrote on it slowly, with the same fountain pen I had used to sign every school permission slip and every birthday card, "Love isn't curated, it's handmade." I stepped back, looked at the photo, the sweater, the glow. That felt right. Not dramatic, not bitter, just true. Not a monument, just a reminder of what mattered, of what endured. I sat down in my old armchair, the one with the cushion that had molded to the shape of my spine. The one where I had stitched the very buttons Leo now wore in that photo. My hands rested in my lap. The clay still sat in a bucket beside me, half worked into something new. The fire in the stove whispered like an old friend, telling me I had done the right thing. The warmth inside my house didn't come from the thermostat. It came from knowing I had never been absent, only hidden by someone else's story. And then, without really planning to, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled a sheet of paper from the drawer, took a breath, and I began to write a letter to David. No anger, no blame, no tally of wrongs, just truth. I told him I remembered every sleepless night he cried as a baby. How I rocked him in the crook of my arm while the wind howled outside our cabin. How I mended his favorite stuffed bear when it tore, and he sobbed like the sky had split. How I sewed his Halloween costumes, even when I was too tired to see straight, because I wanted him to feel like magic. I reminded him of the soup I used to make when he was sick, how I never let the fire go out in winter, how I saved every single crayon drawing he made and taped them to the fridge like they were rare museum pieces. And then I told him that Leo had been mine first, not in the way courts or hospitals define it, but in the way time defines it. In the way that only lullabies sung in the dark, and mittens pulled over tiny hands, and stories whispered into sleepy ears can define it. I told him that just because I had not been part of his pictures did not mean I had not been part of his story. And just because he chose to curate his world without me did not mean I had not lived in it. At the end of the letter, I wrote only this: I'll always craft warmth, whether you wear it or not. I folded the letter in thirds, slipped it into an envelope, sealed it. Then I placed it on the small hallway table next to the basket, where I kept outgoing mail. I stood there for a moment, looking at it, wondering if I'd ever send it, wondering if I even needed to. Maybe it would stay there forever, a weightless thing in a quiet hallway, a record, a heartbeat, a line in the sand. Or maybe one day, I'd drop it in the mailbox. Maybe. But whether he ever read it or not didn't matter. Because I had written it, I had said the words, and sometimes that is enough. Because love, real love, does not perform. It does not parade or pose or caption itself for others. Real love is handmade. It's late nights and quiet mornings. It's stitches you make and never undo. It's the kind of presence that doesn't need to be seen to be felt. And in the stillness of my home, fire crackling, photo hanging, kettle humming its soft song, I knew that everything that mattered still lived here. Not in a gallery, but in this room, in this sweater, in this story, and in the love that shaped it all, whether the world saw it or not. Pomas. Spring came late that year. Montana winters tend to overstay their welcome, like an old ache that flares up even when the calendar insists you should feel better by now. But one morning I opened the door and smelled thaw. The snow had melted into the soil, and small green shoots peeked through the patch near the mailbox. The creek behind the house, frozen for months, had begun to babble again. You learn to recognize these signs, living here long enough. Not all changes come with thunder. Some just start dripping quietly. It was a Thursday when the envelope disappeared from the hall table. I hadn't planned to mail the letter to David. I'd told myself the words were for me, that I didn't need him to see them. But maybe some part of me did. I had left the envelope by the door for weeks, then one morning I walked it to the mailbox without thinking. I tucked it between a seed catalog and a flyer for roofing services, and closed the rusted metal door. No ceremony, just letting it go. Juin. What happened next wasn't immediate. No text, no call. But 5 days later, a package arrived. It was small and brown. The handwriting on the label oddly familiar but stiff, like someone trying to write neatly after years of typing. My name, my address, nothing else. I opened it carefully, heart tapping uncertain beats against my ribs. Inside was the sweater. The green one. Folded neatly. And on top of it, a note. Not long, just a few lines. He wears it every night now, refuses to sleep without it. Says it smells like home. I think maybe I forgot what that meant. Thank you, David. No apology. But something softer than that, something closer to acknowledgement. I held the sweater for a long time, brought it to my face. It smelled faintly of Leo. Of shampoo, crayons, and something sweet. I smiled. Tucked it back into the box. Didn't reply. Not yet. Let him sit with it. Let him feel the weight of what he had almost erased. Over the next few weeks, other small things followed. A photograph slipped into my mailbox. Leo standing in a park, holding a handmade stuffed fox I'd thought had been thrown away. No caption, just the image. Then a voicemail I let go to the machine. Hey, Mother. Just checking in. Hope the snow's melted up there. Leo asked if we could visit sometime. No pressure. Still no apology. Still no declarations. But the ice was thawing. And that was enough. Not every bridge needs rebuilding, some just need to stop burning. I spent that spring doing what I always did: potting, knitting, walking the trails behind the house. Evelyn from down the road stopped by with jam. I made her tea. We didn't talk about David. We didn't need to. Sometimes the people who really love you don't need to know every detail to hold space for your healing. One Sunday afternoon, I pulled out my old ledger again, the one where I tracked everything I'd made for Leo over the years. I flipped to the most recent page and added a new entry: April 28, 2025. Fox plushie repaired, sent by mail. Leo still carrying it. That's enough. I set the book down and stared out the window. Sunlight hit the side of the barn, painting it gold. I didn't know if David and I would ever return to what we once were. But I no longer needed us to. I had already stitched every part of myself into the fabric of his life, into Leo's. Whether they wore it proudly or buried it in closets didn't change the truth of it. What's made with love cannot be unmade by neglect. What's true remains, even if unspoken. Bashmir Leo's. That summer, Leo came to visit. Just once, for a weekend. David dropped him off at the porch with an awkward wave. Said he'd be back Sunday afternoon. He didn't come inside. Just helped Leo out of the car and handed him a small suitcase. Leo ran to me before the engine even turned off. He wrapped his arms around my waist like he used to, like nothing had changed, like children always remember where they were safe. He wore the green wool sweater, a little shorter on him now, sleeves creeping toward his elbows. But he wore it anyway. Gas. I made him pancakes. He helped me feed the robins in the backyard. We picked wildflowers from the meadow behind the house, pressing them into clay to make new story tiles. This time they were about foxes and rivers and brave little boys who found their way back to the forest cottage where they were always loved. He told me about his new school, about a friend who liked to draw dragons, about a dream he had where he flew with butterfly wings. I listened, truly listened, absorbing every word, every nuance of his innocent world. His eyes, bright and unburdened, sparkled with the uncurated joy I remembered so vividly. We molded clay, our hands sticky and joyful, transforming lumps of earth into imaginary creatures. He painted them with vibrant, messy strokes, his laughter echoing through my small studio, a sound more precious than any award. On Sunday, when David came to pick him up, he lingered by the steps. Leo hugged me tight, whispered in my ear, "Grandma, this was the best part of my year." David looked down. Then, very quietly, he said, "He talks about you all the time now." I nodded. "He always did, you just stopped listening." He didn't argue, just nodded back. Then they left, and I stood on the porch, watching the car curve away between the trees, sunlight glinting off the windshield as they disappeared around the bend. But this time, I didn't feel hollow. I felt whole. Haikava. I went inside, sat by the fireplace, looked up at the photograph still hanging above the mantel, and I smiled, because I knew the truth. Love doesn't need permission to be real. It doesn't expire with fashion. It isn't erased by silence. It is handmade, stitched into time. And no matter who tries to rewrite the story, love always finds its way back to the page. Even if it takes years. Even if it arrives wrapped in quiet. Even if it simply returns in the form of a child's arms reaching out without asking why you were never in the pictures. Thank you for listening to my story. It took me a long time to find the words, longer still to believe they mattered. Either way, call in one more time tonight. Virtual comfort toward helpless dull. But if you've made it this far, if something in this story stirred something in you, then maybe, just maybe, we've both been seen. You see, stories like mine don't always make headlines. They don't come with drama that screams. They unfold in kitchens, in silent phones, in the ache of being left out of a photo or a life. But they're real. And they deserve to be told. Because being forgotten is not the same as being gone. And sometimes, the softest voice, the one they tried to curate out, becomes the one they remember most. If this story reminded you of someone you know, or something you felt, or a silence you've carried, then I hope you'll do one thing. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories. This channel is where quiet women finally speak, where mothers, grandmothers, and caretakers who've held it all together finally let it all out. Not in anger, but in clarity. Here, you'll find real stories of betrayal, of sacrifice, of quiet revenge, told not to shame anyone, but to remember everything. Because wisdom doesn't age, it deepens. And revenge, sometimes, it comes in the form of a ceramic button and a child's arms. So if you want more stories like this, stories that sit with you, stories you'll carry into your own still nights, hit that subscribe button. Share it with a friend. Leave a comment if you'd like to tell your own. This is not just a channel, it's a place for the stories they thought would never be told. And I promise you this, we remember everything. And now, finally, so will you. Mass. This is the enduring power of handmade love, of true connection. It's the invisible thread that weaves through generations, through joy and sorrow, through acceptance and rejection. It is the legacy we leave, not in polished photographs or designer labels, but in the indelible mark of our presence, in the warmth of our hands, in the unwavering beat of our hearts. It is a story told not by grand gestures, but by quiet acts of love, by the simple truth of being present, of caring deeply, of loving unconditionally. And that, I've come to understand, is the most powerful aesthetic of all. It cannot be bought, cannot be filtered, cannot be erased. It simply is. The quiet days that followed Leo's visit brought a different kind of growth to my life, not unlike the slow, persistent unfurling of new leaves on the aspens outside my window. The initial pain of David's words at the party had mellowed, transforming into a dull ache, but it was now accompanied by a surprising sense of liberation. The truth, once a heavy burden, had become a light, guiding presence. I was no longer striving for acceptance from a world that had no room for my kind of love. Instead, I focused on cultivating the warmth within my own small sphere. My pottery studio, once a place of quiet solitude, began to hum with a new energy. I wasn't just making pieces to sell. I was making pieces to give, small, intricate ceramic birds, like the robin I'd intended for Leo, found their way into the hands of Mrs. Petrova, Janine, Clara, and the other friends who had rallied around me. Each one was unique, a tiny symbol of resilience and connection. I found myself humming old folk songs as my hands worked the clay, remembering Thomas's quiet strength, David's childhood laughter, and Leo's bright, uncurated joy. One afternoon, a few weeks after Leo's visit, I received an unexpected call. It was Clara, her voice hesitant. "Ilara," she began, "my daughter Mia is doing a school project on local artisans. She's fascinated by your pottery. Would you mind if we came by for an interview? She just needs to ask a few questions about your process." A small smile touched my lips. "Of course, Clara. You're always welcome." Mia arrived a few days later, a shy, bright-eyed girl clutching a notebook and a pencil. She sat politely in my studio, her gaze taking in the shelves stacked with pottery, the bags of clay, the kiln humming softly in the corner. Her questions were earnest, devoid of judgment. She asked about the different types of clay, the firing temperatures, how long it took to create a piece. But then her questions shifted. "Do you put stories into your pottery?" she asked, her eyes wide. "My mom told me you made a special story set for Leo." I paused, picking up a half-finished bird, turning it in my hands. "Yes, Mia, I suppose I do," I said, my voice soft. "Every piece has a story. The earth it comes from, the hands that shape it, the fire that transforms it, and the love that goes into it. Especially the love." I told her about the fox story tiles, about the little ceramic pine cone buttons. Mia listened intently, her pencil flying across her notebook. "So it's not just about what it looks like, is it?" she murmured, more to herself than to me. "It's about what it feels like." Her words resonated deeply. It wasn't about the polished surface, the high-end aesthetic. It was about the touch, the memory, the warmth. It was about the feeling of being held, of being remembered, of being truly seen. Mia's project became a small, unexpected affirmation of the value of my homespun and folk stories. She returned a week later with a drawing she'd made, a vibrant depiction of my studio, with me at the wheel, surrounded by glowing pots and tiny, almost invisible threads of light connecting each piece to a smiling child. She called it the Weaver of Warmth. As summer deepened, so too did the subtle shifts in the landscape of my life. The conversations I had with friends now felt more profound, built on a shared understanding that transcended polite small talk. They started bringing their own rustic treasures to my house: a mended quilt, a hand-carved wooden spoon, a faded photograph of a bygone era. We'd share stories, not of curated lives, but of real ones, messy and beautiful and deeply human. My kitchen table, once a solitary space, became a gathering point, echoing with laughter and the clinking of my hand-thrown mugs. I continued to garden, planting heirloom seeds, nurturing the soil with a reverence born of long years. My hands, still strong and capable, found solace in the simple rhythm of the earth. I realized that my love, like these plants, didn't need grand gestures or elaborate displays to flourish. It needed fertile ground, consistent care, and the light of truth. And perhaps, most importantly, it needed to be freely given, without expectation of return. One breezy afternoon, as I was hanging freshly washed linens on the line, I saw a familiar car pull up my driveway. It was David's. My heart gave a familiar flutter, a mix of apprehension and a persistent, foolish hope. He got out of the car, alone, and walked towards me, his shoulders a little less stiff than usual. He was wearing a casual linen shirt, one I hadn't seen before, and for a fleeting moment, I almost imagined it was one of my own making, comfortable and unpretentious. "Mother," he said, his voice softer than it had been in months. He paused, looking around my garden, taking a deep breath of the mountain air. "It's peaceful here." I simply nodded, waiting. I wouldn't rush him, wouldn't fill the silence. This was his journey, his discovery. He sat on the porch swing, the same one where Leo had often napped in my arms. "Victoria, she's gone to stay with her sister for a while," he said, staring at his hands. "Things have been difficult. After Leo's party, and then, well, the calls started." He finally looked at me, his eyes clouded with a weariness I hadn't seen before. "People asked about the sweater, Mother, about the story tiles. They remembered you. They remembered Leo with them. And then they asked about the Milan boutique caption. They knew it wasn't right." A wave of something akin to pity washed over me, but I held my tongue. This wasn't about triumph. It was about truth. "Victoria said, she said I wasn't supporting her vision enough," he continued, his voice barely a whisper. "She said I let you undermine her. But it wasn't you, Mother. It was them, the people who remembered. They just wanted the real story." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration and exhaustion. "The gallery party, it was supposed to be a triumph. A launch, almost. But it just felt empty. When everyone started leaving, I realized how much we'd been performing. How much we'd lost." He looked at me, his gaze pleading. "I don't know how to fix it, Mother. I don't know how to go back to us." I sat beside him on the swing, its gentle creak a familiar comfort. "You don't go back, David," I said, my voice calm, steady. "You go forward. But you go forward with truth. And with connection." I reached out, placing my hand gently on his arm. His muscles were tense, but he didn't pull away. "You haven't lost everything, my son. You still have Leo. And you still have the memory of what real warmth feels like." David stayed for dinner that night. It was a simple meal: garden vegetables sautéed with fresh herbs, homemade bread, and a hearty lentil soup. There were no imported candles, no discussion of aesthetics, just the comforting smells of real food and the soft glow of lamplight. We talked, not about the past, not about blame, but about Leo. David shared small anecdotes from his school, things he clearly cherished. He told me about Leo's newfound fascination with building intricate Lego castles, a far cry from the curated museum visits. He asked if he could bring his Lego to your studio, David confessed, a hint of a smile touching his lips. He thinks you could help him make ceramic dragons to guard his castles. My heart swelled. He'd be very welcome, I said, imagining Leo's small clay-dusted hands at my workbench once more. Over the next few weeks, David began to visit more regularly. Sometimes, he'd bring a book he was reading, or just sit on the porch swing, lost in thought. He even helped me split some firewood, his movements a little rusty but earnest. He wasn't the boy who used to help his father, but he was trying, he was present. One crisp autumn morning, he arrived with a large box. "Mother," he said, looking slightly sheepish, "I found these in the back of a closet. They were tucked away." Inside the box were several of the handmade gifts I'd given Leo over the years: the hand-stitched crib quilt, the painted growth chart, the knitted animal toys. They were slightly faded, some a little dusty, but undeniably mine, and unmistakably full of the love I had poured into them. I picked up the growth chart, tracing the whimsical forest creatures with my finger. "They're still beautiful, David," I said, my voice thick with emotion. He cleared his throat. I think Leo would like to have them out. In his room, he's been asking about the fox plushie you made, the one with the bent ear. It came back, I told him, a small smile playing on my lips. Mrs. Petrova found it for me. David's eyes widened slightly. She did? So you know about the others then? It wasn't a question, but a quiet admission. He understood now. The network of warmth, the unseen threads that connected me to Leo, had always been there, even when he and Victoria had tried to sever them. That afternoon, we sat together sorting through the box of memories. David actually picked up the crib quilt, running his hand over the soft fabric. "I remember this," he said, a distant look in his eyes. He used to cling to it at night. It smelled like safety. It was a small breakthrough, a crack in the polished facade he'd worn for so long. He was remembering. He was feeling. The winter brought a new kind of quiet to my home, a comfortable silence filled with the gentle rhythms of life. Leo began coming for weekends again, just like before. He brought his Lego creations, and together, in my studio, we would mold and fire ceramic dragons, knights, and even tiny whimsical princesses. His laughter, bright and uninhibited, filled the air, mixing with the earthy scent of clay and the subtle warmth from the kiln. We hung his new ceramic art on the refrigerator, alongside his drawings, creating a vibrant, chaotic tapestry of childhood joy, a stark contrast to the sterile white walls of David's city apartment. David would often join us on Sundays, just sitting, watching, sometimes offering a quiet suggestion. He started leaving his phone in the car, his presence more grounded, more real. One day, he actually got his hands dirty, helping Leo paint a particularly fierce-looking ceramic dragon. He looked up at me, a genuine smile on his face, a smudge of purple paint on his cheek. "This is different, Mother," he admitted. "Good different." Victoria had chosen to stay with her sister, and David moved into a smaller apartment. He was rediscovering himself, shedding the layers of curated living that had suffocated him. He found a new, quieter job, one that allowed him more time with Leo. He started visiting more often, sometimes just for a cup of tea, sometimes to share a quiet meal. We talked about memories, about Thomas, about the simpler times. It wasn't a complete return to the past, but it was a step towards a future built on authenticity. One afternoon, as the first signs of spring emerged, painting the valleys in soft greens and yellows, David walked into my studio, a small, worn box in his hands. "Mother," he began, his voice hesitant but resolute, "I found this. I think it belongs here." He opened the box, and inside lay a collection of my old pottery pieces from his childhood. The chipped porcelain bowl I'd fed him from, a small, lopsided mug he'd helped me glaze when he was 5, a little ceramic pig that had been his first piggy bank. Each one carried a chip, a crack, a faded patch of glaze, imperfections that made them even more beautiful, more real. "These are the ones with your fingerprints," I said, my voice thick with emotion, tracing the faint marks on the little pig. "They're not perfect," David said, a hint of his old self-consciousness in his tone. "No," I replied, looking at him, truly seeing him for the first time in years. "They're not. They're real, and they're loved, just like you." He met my gaze, and in his eyes I saw something shift, something soften. A barrier melted, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the boy I had raised, full of vulnerability and a longing for genuine connection. He didn't say anything, but he reached out and, for the first time in a very long time, he hugged me. It was a proper hug, a warm embrace, not a stiff formality. It smelled of wood smoke and fresh air and the faint scent of clay that clung to my clothes. It smelled like home. That summer, the robins returned to nest outside my kitchen window, their cheerful chirps a constant reminder of life's simple joys. Leo spent most of his school break at my cottage, his laughter echoing through the garden as he chased butterflies. We dug for clay by the riverbank, sculpted fantastical creatures, and fired them in my kiln. He learned to mix glazes, his small hands carefully measuring the powders, his face rapt with concentration. He started calling my studio the magic room, a place where anything could be brought to life. David often joined us, not as a visitor, but as part of the fabric of our days. He'd sit on the porch swing, sipping tea from one of my mugs, watching Leo and me work. Sometimes, he'd pick up a piece of clay, tentatively molding it, a quiet exploration of a part of himself he had long suppressed. He didn't force conversations about the past, and I didn't push them. We simply existed, together, in the comfortable rhythm of our shared days. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in fiery hues, Leo and I sat on the porch, wrapped in the green wool sweater, now a beloved, slightly worn artifact. He was telling me about a new story he was imagining, about a dragon who learned to make friends with a brave little boy. David was nearby, whittling a small piece of wood, something he'd picked up from Thomas's old tools. Leo yawned, snuggling deeper into my side. "Grandma," he mumbled, "I love this sweater. It smells like home." David stopped whittling, his head lifting. His eyes met mine, and in that shared glance, an unspoken promise passed between us. A promise of authenticity, of connection, of a love that didn't need to be curated or filtered. The truth had found its way back, not with a shout, but with a quiet, persistent whisper. It was in the feel of clay beneath our hands, the warmth of the wood stove, the laughter of a child, and the slow, steady rhythm of forgiveness and acceptance. My story wasn't over. It was simply turning a new page, a page hand-bound with love, not dictated by fleeting trends or external expectations. Love doesn't need permission to be real. It doesn't expire with fashion. It isn't erased by silence. It is handmade, stitched into time, molded by hands, fired by enduring spirit. And no matter who tries to rewrite the story, love always finds its way back to the page. Even if it takes years. Even if it arrives wrapped in quiet. Even if it simply returns in the form of a child's arms reaching out without asking why you were never in the pictures. It returns in the rediscovery of shared pasts, in the quiet rebuilding of trust, and in the profound understanding that the most valuable things in life are not the ones displayed in galleries, but the ones crafted with heart, worn with love, and cherished in memory. This is my enduring legacy, and it will continue to be written, one handmade moment at a time. The summer deepened, a tapestry of long golden days and cool star-strewn nights. With David's visits becoming more frequent, and his presence more grounded, a subtle shift occurred in our dynamic. It wasn't a grand, dramatic reconciliation, but a slow, quiet weaving of new threads into the frayed fabric of our relationship. We still didn't speak directly about Victoria, or the painful period of curated distance. It was an unspoken understanding, a tender wound that needed time and space to heal without the prod of re-examination. Instead, our conversations drifted to simpler, more profound topics. David found himself drawn to my studio, not just as a place to observe, but to participate. One afternoon, he picked up a lump of clay, hesitantly, as if it might bite him. Could you show me how to do this again, Mother? He asked, his voice almost a whisper. It was the same question he'd asked as a boy, his eyes wide with curiosity. My heart swelled. I guided his hands, showing him how to center the clay on the wheel, how to coax it upwards, how to find the rhythm of creation. His first attempts were clumsy, yielding lopsided, wobbly forms, but a genuine smile blossomed on his face with each small success. He had forgotten the simple satisfaction of working with his hands, of transforming raw material into something tangible. He told me about the pressures of his former life, the endless pursuit of external validation, the constant need to present a perfect image. It was exhausting, Mother, he confessed one evening, as we sat by the fire, the scent of burning cedar filling the air. Always trying to be what others expected, always chasing the next big thing, the next aesthetic. I lost myself in it, and I lost us. His gaze drifted to the photograph of Leo on the mantel, then to the hand-painted sign beneath it. Love isn't curated, it's handmade. He repeated the words softly, as if tasting them for the first time. I think I'm finally understanding that. His rediscovery of simple joys was palpable. He started bringing me fresh produce from a local farmer's market, taking pride in the ripeness of a tomato or the crispness of a lettuce head. He would help me prune the roses, his large hands surprisingly gentle with the delicate thorns. He was learning to slow down, to breathe, to appreciate the quiet beauty of a life lived authentically. These were small acts, perhaps, but they were mighty in their meaning. Each shared task, each quiet conversation, each moment of shared laughter with Leo was a stitch in the new fabric we were creating. And Leo, innocent architect of this quiet rebuilding, thrived in this renewed warmth. He would flit between David and me, a tiny, joyful bridge. He would show his father the ceramic figures we made together, explaining their stories with breathless enthusiasm. David would listen, truly listen, his attention undivided. The boy who had once seemed almost a prop in a styled life was now the vibrant, pulsing heart of our growing connection. As autumn painted the mountains in fiery hues, I found myself reflecting on the concept of home. For so long, my home had been a sanctuary, a steadfast anchor against the shifting tides of David's life. But now, it felt different. It was expanding not just in its physical space, but in its capacity to hold more love, more vulnerability, more truth. The friends who had stood by me during the party exodus continued to visit, bringing with them a sense of community that had sustained me through the loneliest times. They saw David's slow return, not with judgment, but with quiet understanding. One crisp afternoon, Mrs. Petrova, Leo's former preschool teacher, brought over a batch of her famous plum jam. As we sat drinking tea, her eyes fell on the rehung photograph of Leo in my sweater. "It warms my heart to see that back up, Alara," she said, her voice soft. "He loved that sweater. And the story tiles. He used to carry that little fox everywhere." She paused, then added, "You know, the children sometimes brought in their toys, and you could always tell the difference. The ones made with love, they held a certain presence. A soul. The others, they were just plastic." Her words resonated with the deeper understanding that had been slowly unfurling within me. It wasn't about the monetary value or the brand name. It was about the intention, the energy, the love poured into creation. And that, I realized, was the true currency of life. Later that week, David brought Leo for a special visit. They had spent the morning hiking a local trail, and Leo's cheeks were flushed with excitement. He burst into the studio, clutching a small, smooth river stone. "Grandma, Dad helped me find this. Can we make it into a dragon egg?" David, looking a little winded but happy, leaned against the door frame, watching us. "Ha!" As Leo carefully placed the stone on my workbench, David cleared his throat. "Mother," he began, a rare nervousness in his tone. "I've been thinking about the album, the one with all the things you made for Leo." He gestured vaguely towards the drawer where my ledger lay. And the other things too. My childhood drawings. Thomas's old tools. They're real parts of our story. Our family's story. And they deserve to be seen. To be remembered. I looked at him, surprised. This was a direct acknowledgement of the erasure, a brave step towards reclaiming the lost pieces of our shared history. They do, I agreed, my voice gentle. I want to help you preserve them, he continued, gaining confidence. Maybe we could create a proper archive. Not for display, not for public consumption, but for us, for Leo, so he knows where he came from, what real love looks like. A profound sense of peace settled over me. This wasn't about him apologizing or me forgiving in a theatrical way. This was about understanding. It was about shared memory, about valuing the handmade, the authentic. It was about healing the disconnect, not by erasing the past, but by embracing its full, rich truth. The wounds might never completely disappear, but they could become scars, softened by time and sealed with love. The project David proposed became a quiet ritual, a weekly pilgrimage to my home. We began with my ledger, painstakingly transferring the entries into a digital format, adding details I remembered, stories associated with each handmade piece. David, once so dismissive of my homespun creations, listened intently as I recounted anecdotes. Lily's first Christmas dress, the duckling hat Lily refused to take off, the intricate embroidery on Leo's baby blanket. He scanned old photographs, many of which had never been shared on social media, images of genuine, unposed moments. Leo with spaghetti sauce on his chin, covered in mud from playing in the creek, his wild curls flattened from a long nap. Next, we tackled Thomas's tools. David, a businessman by trade, had little practical experience with carpentry, but he handled his father's old planes and chisels with a newfound reverence. He cleaned them meticulously, his fingers tracing the worn handles, the nicks and grooves that told stories of countless hours spent shaping wood. He taught me so much without ever saying a word, David murmured one afternoon, holding a small carving knife Thomas had made for himself. About patience, about craftsmanship, about pouring yourself into what you create. We curated, not for an external audience, but for ourselves. For Leo, we organized boxes of old letters, faded recipes, my early pottery sketches, and even David's childhood drawings, the ones I had once taped to the fridge like rare museum pieces. It was a painstaking process, but it was also deeply therapeutic. Each item unearthed was a memory revisited, a story retold, a connection reestablished. It wasn't about aesthetics. It was about ancestry. It wasn't about branding. It was about belonging. One particularly rainy Saturday, as we worked in comfortable silence, Leo burst into the studio, his small face alight. "Grandma! Dad, look!" He held up a small, lopsided ceramic bowl, clearly one of David's first attempts from a few weeks prior. But it wasn't empty. Nestled inside was a tiny, perfectly formed clay bird. "I made it myself," Leo announced proudly, his chest puffed out. "Like yours, Grandma. And I put it in Dad's bowl, because he's learning to make things too, just like you." David froze, his eyes wide. He took the bowl from Leo, turning it in his hands, his gaze fixed on the tiny bird. A complex mix of emotions flickered across his face. Surprise, humility, and a fierce, profound, almost overwhelming tenderness. He looked at me, a silent acknowledgement of the generational thread that now visibly connected us all. His first clumsy effort, made sacred by his son's innocent gift. "It's perfect, Leo," David said, his voice thick with emotion. He pulled his son into a tight hug, a spontaneous, genuine embrace that spoke volumes. In that moment, surrounded by the tangible evidence of our shared past, I knew that the true inheritance was not just the physical objects we preserved, but the intangible values we passed down. The love of creation, the respect for honest work, the warmth of uncurated connection. This was the true elevated living, not defined by luxury or social media, but by the richness of human experience, handmade, heartfelt, and truly lived. As the seasons turned, the quiet work of rebuilding and remembering continued, rippling outwards in unexpected ways. David, once so focused on external validation, began to apply the lessons he learned in my studio to other areas of his life. He started seeking out local, independent businesses, drawn to their authenticity and the stories behind their products. He joined a community gardening project, his hands, once accustomed to sleek keypads, now finding comfort in rich soil. He even started telling stories, real stories, to Leo at bedtime, no longer relying on pre-approved children's books, but weaving tales from our family's history. Tales of Thomas, of my pottery, of the mountain community. His relationship with Leo deepened profoundly. There were more scraped knees from outdoor adventures, more muddy footprints on my porch, more genuine laughter echoing through the house. Leo, no longer constrained by a curated childhood, was flourishing, his innate curiosity and spirit allowed to roam free. He spent hours in my studio, creating fantastic creatures and functional pieces, his imagination boundless. The friends who had left the gallery party continued to be a vibrant part of my life. Clara and her daughter Mia became regular visitors, Mia often bringing new questions for her ongoing local artisans project, which had expanded into a school-wide initiative. Other parents, witnessing the positive changes in Leo and the shift in David, began to seek my advice, not on home decor or social media strategies, but on fostering genuine connection, on finding balance in a world obsessed with appearances. I shared my stories, my philosophy of handmade love, not as a critique of their lives, but as an offering of an alternative path. One crisp autumn morning, a year after Leo's ill-fated birthday party, David arrived at my house with a surprise. He had commissioned a local carpenter, an apprentice of Thomas's from years ago, to build a new sign for my pottery studio. It was made of sturdy, reclaimed wood, hand-carved with a simple, elegant script that read, "Alara's Handmade Pottery and Stories, where warmth is always in season." It wasn't flashy or modern. It was timeless. It was true. "It felt right," David said, his voice quiet as we stood looking at the sign, its rich wood glowing in the morning sun. "To acknowledge the stories you tell, and the warmth you create." It was a powerful symbol, not just of a business, but of a philosophy, a testament to the enduring power of authenticity in a world that often prizes superficiality. The seasons continued their timeless dance, and with each passing year the life I had rebuilt became richer, deeper, more vibrant. My studio thrived, not through aggressive marketing, but through word of mouth, through the quiet ripple effect of genuine connection. People sought out my pottery not just for its beauty but for the story it carried, for the warmth it promised. Leo, now a confident and curious boy, was becoming quite the young potter himself, his own unique style emerging. He spoke with pride about his grandma's magic room, and the handmade love that shaped everything within it. He was grounded, secure in the knowledge of his roots, unafraid to be authentically himself. David, too, continued his transformation. He had found a new partner, a kind, gentle woman who valued honesty and simple pleasures. She admired my pottery, not for its potential for display, but for its inherent beauty and the love embedded within each piece. She listened intently to my stories, a quiet respect in her eyes. It was a new chapter for David, one built on a foundation of true connection, not curated perfection. He had learned that true richness wasn't found in what one accumulated, but in what one genuinely shared. The photograph of Leo in the green wool sweater remained above my mantel, a quiet sentinel of truth. Beside it, the hand-painted sign still proclaimed, "Love isn't curated, it's handmade." These were not just declarations. They were living truths, woven into the fabric of my everyday life, affirmed by every conversation, every piece of pottery I shaped, every hug I shared. My story was no longer just about pain or betrayal. It was about resilience, about the power of authenticity, about the about the quiet revolution of living from the heart. It was a testament to the fact that even when forgotten or dismissed, love finds its way back. It reshapes narratives, mends broken bonds, and ultimately builds a legacy that no amount of curated perfection can ever erase. It reminded me that the most profound stories are often not the loudest ones, but the ones whispered from heart to heart, stitched by hand, and passed down through generations, leaving an indelible mark that endures long after the fleeting trends of the world have faded away. And in the stillness of my home, surrounded by the echoes of laughter and the warmth of genuine connection, I knew that everything that truly mattered still lived here. And it always would. As the years gently unfolded, the narrative of my life, once threatened by erasure, solidified into a deep, unwavering truth. Leo grew, his curiosity unblunted, his spirit nourished by the unfiltered love he found at my mountain cottage. He was a sturdy, thoughtful boy, with a keen eye for the natural world and a growing skill with his hands, particularly in the pottery studio. He spent school holidays with me, our days filled with the quiet rhythm of creation, the earthiness of clay, and the ancient wisdom of the mountains. He was building not just skills, but memories, a foundation of connection that no polished veneer could ever replicate. David, too, continued his path of quiet transformation. The strained politeness that had once defined his interactions had long since melted away, replaced by a genuine ease. He had fully embraced his new life, a life less about appearances and more about substance. He often brought his new partner, Sarah, and her young daughter, Lily, a different Lily, a sweet, inquisitive girl, to visit. Sarah was a landscape architect, her appreciation for natural beauty and authentic design aligning perfectly with the ethos of my home. She loved my pottery, not as decorative pieces, but as functional art, born of the earth. We never explicitly discussed the quote birthday party incident with Sarah or Lily, but the essence of it, the importance of genuine connection over superficiality, permeated our interactions. Sarah, with her quiet observations, seemed to grasp it instinctively. She saw the photograph of Leo above the mantel, read the small sign and simply nodded, a knowing smile touching her lips. There was an unspoken understanding that bypassed the need for lengthy explanations. My small cottage became a hub for a quiet, growing community. Friends from the party exodus days still visited, but now they brought new friends, drawn by the palpable sense of warmth and belonging. We shared meals, stories, and the simple camaraderie of people who understood the value of what was real. My pottery classes, once a quiet affair for a few local enthusiasts, grew by word of mouth. People came from neighboring towns, eager to learn not just the craft, but the philosophy behind it, the meditative power of working with your hands, the joy of creating something unique, the beauty of imperfection. They came seeking a connection that felt increasingly rare in a digital, curated world. I often observed David with Leo and Lily, their laughter echoing through the garden, their faces smudged with dirt or clay. He was a different father, a different son. He was present, engaged, his joy unmasked. He had found his way back, not to the path he was on, but to the roots he had nearly forgotten, the roots that tethered him to authenticity, to family, to the handmade love that had always been his true inheritance. He understood now that the most valuable things in life were not those displayed in glass cases or shared on social media, but those woven into the very fabric of our being, through quiet moments, shared effort, and unwavering affection. Years turned into decades. The seasons cycled, bringing new harvests to my garden, new clay to my studio, and new stories to my heart. My hands, though older, still found solace and purpose in the ancient craft of pottery. The Alara's handmade pottery and stories sign, weathered by sun and snow, now seemed like an old friend, a steadfast beacon in a world that continued its relentless pursuit of the fleeting and the new. Leo, now a young man, chose to study environmental design, a field that blended his love for nature with his innate creativity. He spent his summers working with me not just in the studio, but in our ever-expanding garden, learning about sustainable living and the interconnectedness of all things. He spoke often of his desire to create spaces that felt handmade, that fostered genuine connection, and honored the stories of the land and its people. He carried the green wool sweater, carefully mended and worn smooth with age, a tangible link to his childhood and the unwavering love that had shaped him. He also occasionally wore the small, somewhat lopsided ceramic bowl David had made years ago, now a treasured personal item, proving that imperfections, when born of effort and love, become marks of cherished history. David and Sarah built a life rooted in simplicity and authenticity. They visited often, their faces reflecting a deep contentment that had been absent from David's life for too long. He continued to whittle, his hands now skilled, creating beautiful functional objects from found wood, spoons, bowls, small figures. His creations, like mine, were imbued with patience and love, a quiet counterpoint to the hurried pace of modern life. He found his own voice, his own form of handmade. One quiet evening, as the first stars began to pepper the darkening sky, I sat on the porch swing with Leo. He was home from university for a break, and we were simply enjoying the silence. "Grandma," he said, breaking the quiet, "I've been thinking about that birthday party, the one where Dad told you to leave." My heart gave a soft pang, a memory of old pain, long since dulled. "Oh?" I prompted, curious as to how he remembered it. "Yeah," he continued, looking out at the distant mountain peaks. "I remember feeling confused, like a piece was missing. But then, when I came here, when you made me that fox, when we played in the mud, I realized what it was. It was real." He paused, then turned to me, his young eyes clear and earnest. "You taught me that, Grandma. That real things, handmade things, things made with love, they're the ones that last. They're the ones that matter." A profound sense of gratitude washed over me. My voice was thick as I replied, "And you, my dear Leo, you helped me remember it." The story of my life, once seemingly defined by exclusion, had blossomed into a testament to inclusion. The aesthetic they had sought to curate had crumbled, while the homespun and folk stories had woven themselves into an enduring tapestry. Love, I knew, was a force that transcended superficiality. It didn't need grand pronouncements or polished presentations. It simply needed to be given, received, and remembered. And that, in its purest form, was the most beautiful, most authentic, and most powerful story of all. It was the story that continued to unfold, stitch by stitch, with every sunrise over the Montana peaks, with every pot thrown on the wheel, and with every loving embrace that affirmed, what's made with love cannot be unmade by neglect. What's true remains, even if unspoken. The faint scent of damp clay and wood smoke always lingered in my studio, a comforting aroma that spoke of creation and quiet perseverance. Now, it was often mingled with the excited chatter of Leo and his younger half-sister Lily. Lily, with her bright, curious eyes, was just beginning to explore the magic of the wheel, her tiny hands guided by Leo's patient instruction. It was a beautiful thing to witness, the passing down of knowledge, not through formal lessons, but through shared passion and familial connection. I often sat on my stool simply watching them, my own hands idle but my heart full. Leo would demonstrate how to wedge the clay, his movements fluid and practiced, a testament to the countless hours he'd spent by my side. Lily, giggling, would try to mimic him, often ending up with clay splattered on her nose, which Leo would gently wipe away with his thumb. Their bond, unburdened by past complexities, was pure and uncurated, a vibrant contrast to the strained relationships I had once navigated. One sunny afternoon, as they worked, a local journalist from a small, independent online publication arrived. She was a young woman, fresh out of university, clearly drawn to the local stories that often went unnoticed by larger media outlets. She had heard about my pottery, about the unique way I ran my studio, and about the community of warmth that seemed to gather around my home. She interviewed me, asking about my process, my inspiration, and the history of my craft. But her questions soon turned to the deeper current she sensed. "There's a feeling here," she observed, gesturing around the rustic, yet vibrant studio. "It's so different from the polished, perfect images we see everywhere else. What makes it so real?" I smiled, my gaze sweeping over Leo and Lily, their heads bent in concentration over their clay. "It's the love," I told her simply. "The intention." When something is made by hand, with heart, it carries a piece of the maker's soul. It's not about being flawless, it's about being authentic. And people, deep down, they yearn for authenticity. I shared snippets of my philosophy, not the painful details of my estrangement, but the enduring lessons learned, the value of quiet moments, the importance of genuine connection, the beauty of imperfection, the strength found in staying true to oneself. Leo, overhearing parts of our conversation, piped up. "Grandma says love isn't curated, it's handmade, like our dragons." Lily nodded vigorously, her hands covered in green glaze. The journalist's eyes lit up. She understood. Her article, when it was published a few weeks later, was titled, "The Soulful Clay of Montana, Finding Authentic Connection in Alara's Handmade World." It wasn't a story of revenge or bitterness, but of resilience, of an elder's quiet wisdom, and of the profound human need for things that are real. It spoke of the enduring legacy being passed down to a new generation, a legacy woven not from polished image, but from tangible acts of love and creation. It celebrated the homespun and folk stories that had once been dismissed, proving that some narratives born of truth and heart can never truly be erased. As the seasons continued their timeless dance, my life felt not just complete, but abundant. The small ripple effect that began years ago had grown into a steady, gentle current, drawing more and more people to the authenticity of my home and my craft. My pottery courses were fully booked, attracting students from all walks of life, not just those seeking a hobby, but those seeking a connection, a slower pace, a re-engagement with their own innate creativity. I introduced new workshops, teaching the art of hand building without a wheel, emphasizing the unique character each piece takes on when shaped purely by human touch. We'd gather for storytelling Saturdays, where participants brought their own cherished handmade items and shared the memories woven into them. It became a tapestry of shared human experience, a testament to the power of personal history and the enduring value of things made with care. Leo continued to thrive at university, often calling me with excited updates about his environmental design projects. He was passionate about creating spaces that felt integrated with nature, spaces that honored craftsmanship and sustainability. He frequently referenced lessons learned in my studio about the soul of materials and the story embedded in every deliberate act of creation. He was building his own legacy, one rooted deeply in the values I held so dear. David and Sarah, now married, were pillars of support and love. David had truly found his footing, shedding the last vestiges of his old, performance-driven life. He was working for a nonprofit, dedicating his time to community development, his business acumen now channeled towards helping others build sustainable futures. He spoke with a quiet confidence, his eyes reflecting a peace I had never thought possible for him. Sarah, with her calm strength, was a wonderful addition to our family, and Lily blossomed under their loving care, her adventurous spirit complementing Leo's thoughtful nature. One crisp autumn evening, gathered around my large kitchen table, filled with the laughter of family and friends, David raised a glass. "To Mother," he said, his voice clear and heartfelt. "To the real architect of our lives. You taught us that true wealth isn't in what you accumulate, but in what you create with love. You taught us that the most beautiful things are often the most imperfect. And you taught us the power of a story that's truly handmade." I looked around the table. Leo, his hand resting on Lily's shoulder. Sarah, her eyes warm with affection. My steadfast friends, their faces etched with the lines of shared history and unwavering loyalty. My heart swelled, overflowing with a quiet, profound joy. The journey had been long, marked by moments of deep pain and profound silence. But through it all, the truth of handmade love, the power of authenticity, and the strength of unbreakable bonds had prevailed. My narrative, once challenged, had become a testament to enduring strength, a living story whispered not just through words, but through the warmth of a mug held in cold hands, the comfort of a sweater on a chilly day, the steadfast presence of a loving heart. It was a story woven into the very fabric of our lives, an ongoing legacy of connection, proving that what is crafted with love truly lasts forever. The Montana seasons continued their majestic cycle, each bringing new beauty and new rhythms to my life. The golden light of summer yielded to the fiery embrace of autumn, the crisp silence of winter, and the gentle promise of spring. My hands, though marked by the passage of time, continued their dance with the clay, creating pieces that carried the stories of these seasons, the echoes of laughter, and the quiet wisdom gleaned from a life fully lived. My studio, once a solitary sanctuary, was now a vibrant hub. It wasn't just a place for pottery, it was a place for connection. Aspiring artists, young mothers, retired teachers, they all found their way to my door, drawn by the intangible warmth that permeated the air. They learned to wedge clay, to center it on the wheel, to coax form from raw earth. But more importantly, they learned to slow down, to listen to the quiet hum of creation, to appreciate the beauty in imperfection, and to trust the wisdom of their own hands. They learned that the most profound art wasn't always found in galleries, but in the everyday act of making, of sharing, of simply being present. Leo, now a thriving professional, often returned to the cottage, bringing his own innovative designs and a profound respect for the traditional crafts. He spoke of integrating handmade elements into modern architecture, bridging the gap between cutting-edge design and timeless artistry. He was carrying forward the torch of authenticity, ensuring that the legacy of handmade love continued to illuminate new pathways. David and Sarah settled into a life of genuine contentment, were frequent visitors, their presence a quiet testament to the power of growth and forgiveness. David had found a deep fulfillment in his community work, his once strained demeanor replaced by a calm, purposeful energy. He often whittled by the fireplace, the rhythmic scrape of wood, a soothing sound that merged with the crackle of the fire, creating a symphony of peace. Sarah, with her green thumb, helped me expand my herb garden, bringing new life and fragrance to our already vibrant space. Lily, now a spirited teenager, delighted in showing off her own burgeoning pottery skills, often collaborating with Leo on whimsical ceramic sculptures. Looking back, the memory of that painful birthday party had faded, not into oblivion, but into a distant echo, a reminder of how far we had all come. It no longer carried the sting of rejection, but served as a testament to resilience, to the enduring power of truth, and to the unwavering nature of genuine love. My life had become a living, breathing example of the very principles I had clung to, that real connection cannot be bought or curated, that love is found in the everyday, in the imperfections, in the honest giving of oneself. The true harvest of my life was not measured in ribbons or accolades, but in the warmth that filled my home, in the laughter that echoed through my garden, in the depth of connection shared with family and friends, and in the quiet knowledge that what is made with love, what is given with an open heart truly lasts forever. It was an unending harvest, abundant and deeply fulfilling. The quiet rhythms of my life in Maria Aurora, Central Luzon, continued to shape my days, each dawn bringing a fresh opportunity for creation and connection. My pottery studio, nestled amidst the lush greenery of the Philippine countryside, had become more than just a workspace. It was a living testament to the enduring power of handmade love. The scent of clay, earthy and grounding, mingled with the fragrance of blooming sampaguita from my garden, a unique blend that spoke of both my Montana roots and my cherished life here. Leo, now well into his architectural career, often brought his own students to visit. They came not just to see the studio, but to learn about the philosophy behind the Alara's handmade pottery and stories sign that weathered gracefully by the gate. He would explain to them how every piece, every curve of a pot, every hand-pressed pattern, carried a story of patience, of dedication, of a love that bypassed the need for curated perfection. His lectures, delivered amidst the warmth of my kilns and the scent of firing clay, resonated deeply with these young minds, eager to find meaning beyond the sleek lines of modern design. David and Sarah, frequent visitors from Manila, had found their own quiet corner in our bustling household. David, his face softened by genuine contentment, would often spend hours in my garden, learning about native Philippine plants from local horticulturists I knew. He had embraced the slower pace, the emphasis on sustainability and community, a stark contrast to his former life. Sarah, with her keen eye for natural beauty, found inspiration for her landscape designs in the very hills that surrounded my home, often sketching new ideas while sipping tea from my hand-thrown mugs. The community that had formed around my studio continued to flourish. Local artisans from nearby towns would gather for informal workshops, sharing techniques, stories, and the camaraderie of those who understood the profound satisfaction of working with their hands. We exchanged ideas, recipes, and laughter, weaving a rich tapestry of shared lives and passions. My once isolated existence had transformed into a vibrant hub, a beacon for authenticity and human connection in a world that often felt increasingly fragmented. Looking back, the hurt of that long-ago birthday party had receded into a distant, almost abstract memory. It was no longer a wound but a scar, a reminder of a lesson learned, a truth discovered. The superficiality and the cold rejection had ultimately cleared the path for a deeper, more profound understanding of what truly mattered. My legacy was not to be found in perfect photographs or curated social media feeds, but in the enduring warmth that emanated from my home, in the genuine laughter that filled my studio, and in the unspoken language of hands creating, connecting, and loving. It was a legacy woven into the very fabric of the earth, fired by the kiln of experience, and glazed with the vibrant colors of an authentic life. And that, I knew with absolute certainty, was a legacy that would truly last forever. The years in Maria Aurora flowed like the nearby river, steady and nourishing, carving deeper grooves of meaning into my life. My pottery studio, Ilara's Handmade Pottery and Stories, became a point of gentle pilgrimage for people seeking not just beautiful objects, but a connection to something authentic and enduring. The sign, weathered by the tropical sun and occasional downpours, bore witness to countless conversations, shared silences, and the quiet joy of creation. The local community had embraced me fully, seeing my work not just as a business but as a cultural offering. I collaborated with indigenous artisan groups, learning their traditional weaving and carving techniques, and sharing my knowledge of ceramics. We held joint exhibitions at the town's cultural center, showcasing a vibrant fusion of local craftsmanship and my unique approach to handmade art. These events weren't about commercial success, they were celebrations of heritage, skill, and the universal language of creation. Leo, now a respected architect, frequently incorporated elements of local artistry and sustainable practices into his designs across the Philippines. His projects, whether resort villas or community centers, always had a handmade heart, often featuring custom ceramic tiles from my studio or woven details from my artisan friends. He would bring his clients to Maria Aurora, not to impress them with grandeur, but to immerse them in the genuine beauty of human connection and authentic creation. He was a living bridge between the world of modern design and the timeless wisdom of traditional craft. David and Sarah had built a thriving life in Manila, but their visits to Maria Aurora remained sacred. David, with his renewed appreciation for the tangible, had taken up woodworking, creating simple, elegant furniture for their home. His hands, once only familiar with spreadsheets and corporate presentations, now found solace in the grain of wood. Sarah had launched a successful business specializing in sustainable landscape design, often drawing inspiration from the rich biodiversity of the Philippine countryside. Their children, Lily and a younger son named Noah, were growing up surrounded by an appreciation for authenticity, their childhood rich, with visits to my studio and explorations of the natural world. My days were filled with the gentle rhythm of teaching, creating, and connecting. The early mornings were for potting, the afternoons for tending my garden, and the evenings for quiet reflection, often accompanied by the laughter of my grandchildren. I would watch Lily's small hands carefully shaping a clay bird, or listen to Noah's imaginative stories as he painted a ceramic mask. Their joy was unburdened, their creativity unrestrained, a direct contrast to the curated childhood I had once witnessed. The memory of that distant birthday party, where I was told to leave, had truly transformed. It was no longer a source of pain, but a quiet, powerful testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. It reminded me that even when faced with rejection and erasure, the path of authenticity, love, and genuine connection will always find its way. My legacy, I understood, was not just in the beautiful pottery I created, but in the countless lives I had touched, in the seeds of authenticity I had planted, and in the unwavering belief that love, truly handmade, resonates across all distances, all curated facades, and all time. It was a never-ending story, written in clay, etched in memory, and lived with an open heart. As the years continued their graceful procession, a new generation began to weave itself into the enduring tapestry of my life in Maria Aurora. Leo, now a leading voice in sustainable architecture, brought his own children, twin girls named Maya and Luna, to spend summers at my cottage. Their laughter, bright and clear, echoed through the studio, mingling with the whir of the pottery wheel and the soft rustle of bamboo outside. Maya, thoughtful and precise, showed an early aptitude for wheel throwing, her small hands quickly mastering the delicate dance of centering clay. Luna, spirited and imaginative, gravitated towards hand-building, sculpting whimsical creatures and abstract forms with boundless energy. I watched them, my heart full, seeing echoes of myself, of David, and of Leo in their focused faces and clay-dusted hands. The legacy of creation, of finding joy in the tangible, was passing seamlessly through them. David and Sarah, though now seasoned professionals, continued their regular pilgrimages to Maria Aurora. Their children, Lily and Noah, were growing into remarkable young adults, grounded and authentic. Lily, a talented photographer, found endless inspiration in the natural light and candid moments that filled my home, her lens capturing the raw beauty of handmade life that contrasted sharply with the filtered images of the wider world. Noah, with his quiet strength, had developed a passion for traditional building techniques, often assisting local artisans in restoring old wooden houses in the community. The studio itself had evolved into a multi-generational creative hub. Local artists, artisans from indigenous communities, Leo's students, and my own family members would gather, sharing skills, stories, and meals. We experimented with new glazes made from local minerals, adapted ancient firing techniques, and debated the philosophical underpinnings of art and craft. It was a dynamic, vibrant ecosystem of creativity, rooted deeply in the principles of connection and authenticity that had become the cornerstone of my existence. Looking at them all, gathered around my long, sturdy wooden table during a particularly lively evening, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The journey had been long, marked by moments of profound hurt and challenging introspection. But the path I had chosen, the path of unwavering authenticity and handmade love, had led not only to my own healing, but to a ripple effect that touched countless lives. The aesthetic of curated perfection had long since faded into irrelevance, replaced by the enduring beauty of genuine connection, of shared passion, and of the rich, messy, beautiful truth of life. My legacy was no longer just about the pots I created or the lessons I taught. It was about the living, breathing testament of a family reconnected, a community strengthened, and a philosophy of life passed down, not through grand pronouncements, but through the simple, profound act of making, loving, and remembering. And in that quiet strength, in that continuous thread of connection stretching across generations, I found an unending source of peace and joy, knowing that the most valuable stories are indeed the ones we handcraft, stitch by stitch, with all our heart. I can certainly bring the story to a close here, providing a satisfying conclusion that wraps up the narrative threads and emphasizes the core message. The final years in Maria Aurora were a testament to the enduring power of a life lived authentically, a life shaped by intention and love, not by external expectations. My physical movements became a little slower, my hands a little more gnarled, but the fire within my spirit burned brighter than ever. My studio remained a vibrant heart of creativity, a place where generations intertwined, where the ancient craft of pottery bridged past, present, and future. Leo, now a respected leader in his field, continued to bring his own students and colleagues to Maria Aurora. He spoke passionately about the lessons learned at Grandma's studio, emphasizing that true innovation lay in understanding roots, in honoring craftsmanship, and in infusing design with human warmth. His twin daughters, Maya and Luna, teenagers now, were as comfortable with a lump of clay as they were with their digital devices. Maya excelled on the pottery wheel, creating elegant, minimalist forms, while Luna continued to surprise us with her wildly imaginative, hand-sculpted pieces. They were both eloquent advocates for the handmade, their voices carrying the message of authenticity into their own generation. David and Sarah had built a beautiful, grounded life, finding their rhythm in the quiet joys of family and meaningful work. David's woodworking creations were now sought after by those who appreciated their simplicity and the story they told of his own rediscovery. He often brought his younger children, Lily and Noah, to my studio, sharing stories of his own childhood, of his father Thomas, and of the profound journey that had led him back to the embrace of true family. Lily, with her photographer's eye, captured countless candid moments in the studio and garden, building an archive of genuine life that far surpassed any curated feed. Noah, methodical and kind, often spent hours just listening to the hum of the kiln, finding his own quiet peace in the creative atmosphere. My life had come full circle. The initial pain of rejection had transmuted into an unexpected gift, allowing me to forge a deeper, more authentic path. The homespun and folk stories that were once deemed inadequate had become the very foundation of a rich, meaningful existence, influencing not just my family, but a wider community, drawn to the truth they represented. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, casting long, golden shadows across my studio, I sat in my favorite armchair, a cup of warm herbal tea in my hands. The studio was quiet, the day's work done. On the mantel, the old photograph of young Leo in the green wool sweater, alongside my hand-painted sign proclaiming, "Love isn't curated. It's handmade," seemed to glow with an inner light. I thought of all the hands that had touched the clay in this room, all the stories whispered, all the laughter shared. I thought of the countless stitches, the meticulous glazes, the simple acts of care that had defined my life. It wasn't a life of grand pronouncements or public accolades. It was a life built on the quiet, enduring power of authentic connection, of creating with purpose, and of loving fiercely, without condition or expectation. This, I realized, was the true triumph. Not the absence of pain, but the capacity to transform it. Not the perfect image, but the messy, beautiful reality. My story was not just my own. It was a testament to anyone who has ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or misunderstood. It was a gentle reminder that the warmth we create with our own hands, the love we pour into the lives of others, is a legacy that transcends time, trends, and even perceived rejection. It is an ever-present warmth, an unbreakable bond, a quiet, profound truth that always finds its way back home.